Welcome to another deep dive. We're tackling Romans 5, 3-5 today.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It is. And I think it's going to be especially interesting for pastors and Bible study leaders out there,
Yeah,
looking for some fresh angles for their teaching.
for sure. Because, everybody knows this passage, right?
Yeah.
Suffering produces perseverance and character and hope.
Right. But how do you make it come alive for people who've heard it a million times?
Exactly.
That's what we want to dig into.
Yeah, we've got a whole stack of sermons and analyses.
Yeah, we found some really unique approaches.
Oh, yeah.
So let's jump right in. What are some of the themes that popped up for you?
Well, one thing that really stood out was how many pastors are framing suffering as like a test of faith.
Okay, so not just like a random bad thing happening, but
Not punishment, no.
more like a purposeful refining process.
Exactly. And one pastor even brought up the original Greek word dokim
Oh, yeah.
to really highlight that testing aspect. It's not just hardship. It's like God is using these trials to purify our faith.
To make it stronger.
Yeah, more resilient. Like he's got a purpose for it all.
I like that.
Yeah.
It shifts the focus from just enduring suffering to actually seeing the benefit.
Yeah, and it made me think of that sermon that used the analogy of hitting a wall.
Oh, yeah.
You know those times in your spiritual journey where you hit a wall of dryness or doubt?
Yeah.
It can feel like a setback, but it's actually an opportunity to grow in steadfastness.
You have to push through it.
Right. And get stronger because of it.
Hmm.
And then there was that one pastor who used Daniel Tiger to illustrate this.
Wait, Daniel Tiger? The children's show.
Yes! Remember that episode where Daniel learns that grown-ups come back?
Oh, yeah.
It's brilliant, connecting with parents in the audience while also getting at that deeper truth.
Wow. I never would have thought of that.
It's so creative. And it shows how these pastors are really thinking outside the box.
Yeah, they're going beyond just, the usual Sunday school answers.
Exactly.
So it seems like a lot of these sermons are focusing on how God uses suffering for our good.
Yeah, even though it might not feel good at the time.
Right, like that old saying, God works in mysterious ways.
Yeah, and one pastor even took it a step further, framing suffering as the key to fulfilling our destiny.
Whoa.
He compared it to going to the gym.
Oh, I like that.
It's tough in the moment, but it builds character and strength that you need to reach your full potential.
So it's not just about surviving trials, but about becoming who God created us to be through those trials.
Exactly.
And speaking of purpose, the life of Joseph was a popular illustration that kept coming up.
Oh, yeah. Joseph's story is full of trials.
But it's also such a clear example of how God can use even the most unjust circumstances for good.
Right. One pastor actually compared Joseph's trials to a prison test,
Oh, wow.
emphasizing how God used that unjust imprisonment to prepare Joseph for leadership.
Wow.
It reminds us that God's ways are often beyond our understanding.
They are.
But we can trust that he's working everything out for our good.
That's so encouraging.
Yeah, especially for those who are going through a rough time right now.
Yeah, when you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Right. God is still there and he's still working things out.
That's a good reminder.
It is.
And I bet there are even more creative ways that pastors are using that story
Oh, absolutely.
to bring this whole idea of suffering and purpose
Yeah.
to life for their congregation.
Yeah, and we'll get into some of those right after this break. It's amazing how relevant those Old Testament stories still are.
I know, right?
And pastors are finding such creative ways to connect them to modern life.
Yeah, like one pastor tied Joseph's story to the idea of standing grace.
Oh, yeah. Not just a one-time thing at salvation, but like a constant source of strength.
Yeah, one sermon described it as like a present tense kind of grace.
With a continuing attitude.
Yeah, it's like we're constantly being held up by God's grace.
Yes. And that ties in beautifully with the perseverance that Romans 5, 3-5 talks about, right?
We're not just gritting our teeth through trials.
We're relying on God's grace.
Oh man, that reminds me of that courtroom analogy.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one.
It was brilliant. The pastor said the beginning of Romans is like humanity on trial.
And faith in Jesus is our defense attorney.
Yes. And not only are we not condemned because of Christ,
But we have this unshakable standing before God,
because of his grace. It's not just about escaping judgment.
but about being empowered to live victoriously.
It's so empowering, right?
What about-
We don't have to face trials alone.
That standing grace gives us the confidence to overcome.
And it's not just about overcoming, it's about becoming more like Christ through those trials.
Absolutely. A lot of these sermons emphasize character development.
Like that sculptor's chisel metaphor.
Yes, those trials are shaping us, refining us, even when it's painful.
to reveal the beauty that God sees.
And it's not a one-time thing either.
It's an ongoing process,
Being molded.
prepared for what God has called us to.
It's like that quote, character is preparation for destiny.
Ooh, I like that.
Right. Those trials become opportunities to strengthen our spiritual muscles.
Perseverance, patience.
All those qualities we need to fulfill our purpose.
It's amazing how much depth there is to this one little verse.
I know. It's like peeling back layers of an onion.
Speaking of layers, let's talk about those creative sermon illustrations we found.
Oh, yeah. Those are fun.
Like that pastor who compared suffering to a floodlight exposing the dark corners of our lives.
That one was so powerful. It's not about shaming people.
It's about how trials can lead to greater self-awareness.
And a deeper reliance on God's grace.
It's like those trials force us to face those things we've been sweeping under the rug.
Yeah, you got to deal with them head on.
And then we can experience true freedom.
And then there was that analogy with food aversions.
Oh, yeah. That was a good one.
You have one bad experience with a certain food.
You can't even look at it without feeling sick.
Exactly. And the pastor used that to show how sin becomes less appealing as we grow spiritually.
As we confront our brokenness during trials.
Right. It creates a healthy aversion to sin.
Like our spiritual palates are being refined.
I love that. And it reminds us that spiritual growth isn't always easy or pleasant.
Sometimes it takes those difficult experiences to appreciate the sweetness of God's grace.
And, of course, pastors are drawing inspiration from all sorts of places to make these points come alive.
We saw everything from Daniel Tiger to Les Miserables to courtroom dramas.
It's amazing how God can speak to us through so many different things.
It's like a reminder to all of us who teach or preach, don't be afraid to think outside the box.
Look for those unexpected connections.
That will resonate with your audience.
And help them truly grasp the message of Romans 5:3-5.
Because ultimately, it's not about delivering a dry academic lecture.
It's about connecting with people's hearts.
And helping them experience the transformative power of God's Word.
You are so right.
Before we wrap up, I want to talk about one more aspect of these sermons that really stood out to me. It was how many pastors emphasize the importance of actively choosing to trust God.
Even when it's hard.
Yeah, it's not just about passively enduring trials,
It's about a wholehearted commitment
to following God's path.
choosing faith over fear.
Oh, and one sermon highlighted the story of Caleb.
Oh, yeah, from the Old Testament.
He was one of the spies sent to Canaan.
And even though everyone else was terrified by what they saw,
Caleb trusted God's promise.
and urged the people to move forward with courage.
What a powerful example,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the context of Romans 5:3-5.
Right.
It's a reminder that true faith isn't about never having doubts or fears,
It's about choosing to trust God.
even when you're feeling those things.
And that same sermon connected that idea to the idea of letting Christ's character shine through us.
Especially during tough times.
Yeah.
So it's not just about saying we believe in Jesus
But about letting our actions and our responses reflect His love,
and His grace.
even when things are hard.
Yeah, those trials become opportunities to show the world what God's power and faithfulness look like.
In real life.
Not just in theory.
Exactly.
And that ties in so well with the theme of hope that we see throughout Romans 5:3-5.
It's not just wishful thinking.
It's a confident expectation.
That God is working everything out for our good.
One pastor put it so well. He said, hope appoints.
It's about actively embracing God's plan.
Even when we can't see the full picture.
And that brings us back to those amazing sermon illustrations.
Oh, yeah. Do you remember the one that compared trials to a crayon box?
Oh, yes. Each crayon is a different kind of trial,
And God is the artist.
using all those colors to create a masterpiece.
Such a vivid picture of how God takes all of our experiences, even the painful ones,
And uses them to create something beautiful.
and meaningful,
Yeah, and it's a good reminder that we shouldn't shy away from challenges.
or try to avoid difficult situations.
Instead, we can see them as opportunities.
For growth,
Transformation.
knowing that God is the ultimate artist,
Guiding the process.
and that He has a purpose.
For every color in that crayon box.
I love that. And another sermon pointed out that trials are just part of being human.
We're all going to face them.
It's our attitude
Our choice to trust God.
that makes all the difference.
It's not about wishing for a trial-free life,
It's about facing those trials with faith
knowing that God is with us.
every step of the way.
Romans 5:3-5 isn't just a feel-good verse.
It's a call to action.
A reminder that we can choose to let suffering break us,
Or we can choose to let it refine us
shape us.
and ultimately lead us closer to God
It's a message of hope,
and resilience
and it's a message that we need to hear,
and share.
especially in a world full of challenges and uncertainty.
So as you prepare to teach or preach on Romans 5, 3-5,
Think about the richness of this passage.
and all the creative ways that these pastors have brought it to life,
Challenge yourself
and your listeners,
to go beyond the surface,
to see suffering not as punishment, but as a sculptor's chisel.
shaping us into the image of Christ.
What a powerful thought to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Romans 5, 3-5.
It's been a pleasure,
We hope you found it insightful and encouraging.
and we'll see you next time.